Welcome to this meeting of the Mind, Technology, and Society seminar series, the longest running seminar series here at UC Merced, brought to you by the Cognitive and Information Sciences Group and kindly sponsored by the School of Social Sciences, Humanities, and Arts, and additionally the Robert Glushko and Pamela Samuelson Foundation. Today we get a treat. We get to pull somebody into this academic environment who has been out largely of that academic environment for a long time, but used to be very immersed in it. And I think a lot of you, particularly the graduate students, will be very interested in hearing about the work that goes on in certain industrial settings that leverages the kind of research that you could be doing in graduate school. So our speaker today is Dr. Thyme-Gobbel. I actually met her for the first time when I was in graduate school in San Diego. We were both in the interdisciplinary Cognitive Science program in San Diego, but I really didn't get to know her until quite by coincidence. We both ended up in Pittsburgh, and got to hear lots of stories of their car sliding down the ice on a hill and fun things like that. So Anne has a background in speech and its role in user experience. She's worked for companies like Nuance, a smaller group that you might not have heard of called 22 Otters, a wide variety of different settings, and she's going to talk a lot about them, if I understand correctly, today. But I do want to share one more anecdote before I sit down, and that is, a long time ago, I visited Anne and her husband Randy, and they were showing off speech recognition technology that they had there on their desktop computer, and grabbed the microphone. What do you say? What do you say? To see whether it, grabbed a book off a shelf. It was a cheap science fiction book of some type, turned it around the back, and there was something about a giant space cloud that engulfed them all. And he looked up at the screen and said, "Golf in the mall." I think we've come a long way.
Maybe.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Thyme-Gobbel.
We still use that example. Golf in the mall. That's a great example. All right, so I will try to speak up. I'm not known for my booming voice, but you know, if I'm not loud enough, you'll have to come closer up. So I want to start. So I just had lunch recently with a couple of ex-coworkers who are now at Google, doing voice stuff. That's what one does. And we're talking about our time at Nuance, and one of my friends said basically this. We were talking about what was so special when we were there, because we were really excited back in the day. It was like, I started there in '99, and I was there for like 12, 13 years. And what she said was, what we all had in common was this curiosity about how people communicate, how they perceive speech and language, and how they produce it. A desire to understand how people think, really. And that's kind of really it. And I was like, yeah, we're kind of really, and not some people were from a cog-sci background. There were people who were linguists, psychology, sociology, whatever. It's kind of, your typical cog-sci people. So I was kind of looking back at, where I've gone through the world of industry and ended up where I am today. And it really wasn't a choice that I made along the way. I just thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm going to do that. And okay, I'll do that thing now. So I'm going to kind of go through examples of these 5 different, the 5 full-time jobs that I've had since I finished grad school. And, the kinds of stuff that we did there that were really cog-sci stuff. There's a lot of user experience things. It's really, the thread is speech and language, in technology and user experience, UI design stuff. And then I'm going to jump into some really in-depth results from one of those places too, and talk about some things that we got to. All right, so there are the 5 places I'm going to talk about. And one thing, because this is something that people are finding really interesting too, we're talking about lunch, it's like, well, what's it like to work in industry? And do you like this or that, whatever. Well, so it depends, right? It's a classic it depends answer. So the types of jobs, the first place I was at was called Natural Speech Technologies. It was also called Emerson and Stern. Then it was called Natural Speech Technologies. It was an R&D small company, right? Small R&D company. They survived on small business grants, NSF grants, that kind of stuff. Did some cool stuff. It was early, pretty early in the speech and language tech world. So we were like, hey, let's try this. Let's see what we can do. And so that was more of an R&D kind of thing. It was very open. It was small. Had no money. Still money. And then basically the next job after that was Nuance, which started at, when I started, it was 150 people, and then when I left, it was like 6,000 or something, because they're known for eating other companies, right? They get big very fast. And then I went to Lab 126, which is Amazon, and I was there for a little bit, and then, so of course that's humongous, and very secretive. And then I left from there and went to a small startup called 22 Waters. And again, that was about the same size as the first one. So it's back to, we don't have any money, but you can pretty much do whatever you want as long as it fits in the space here. And you want to publish stuff, sure, go for it. You want to go to conferences, well, if you pay for it, you can do that. It's like we don't have any money, but it's a different kind of space too. And then now I'm at, it's called Sound United, but it's Denon Moran's bulk audio, right? Doing kind of, the same kind of stuff that you would get out of Alexa, Echo kind of stuff. It's like interactive assistant kind of stuff. So that's where we're going with this. So, all right, there I am, many years ago. So I started out just having these slides. I had these slides from earlier because they're kind of talking points for me to remember what I was doing. But so at UCSD, I was always really interested in phonetics, but for various reasons I ended up not doing a phonetics PhD, but more of a sort of computational and UX related kind of thing. But I did a bunch of phonetics. I was always kind of interested in that. So I started, excuse me, while I was a grad student, I think Jeff Ellman said, hey, LDC, they need some people who know phonetics. They need to do some phonetic marking for the King database, for the speaker verification stuff. I'm like, I can do that. And as a foreign student, because I came from Sweden, as a foreign student, I was pretty limited on what kind of stuff I could do to actually, make money and stuff like that, right? So I'll do that. And that sounds cool. So I did that. And my point of bringing that up is, my number one lesson is, in order to figure out what you want to do with yourself, if any opportunity falls in your lap and sounds remotely interesting, just do it. Because at least you're going to find out if you like it or not. You might find out you don't like it, and that's great. Anyway, so then, while I was still a grad student, I then started doing the same thing for this company called Natural Speech Technologies, right? And it was all R&D, and again, I thought I could start working here. I could do some cool stuff, it's language related. It was a lot of phonetic stuff. What we worked on creating tools for speech therapists. So this was one where you could actually see, it's like a mid-sagittal view, and like kids trying to say something into a microphone, and it gets digitized, and you can see like tongue flapping and stuff like that. It was kind of cool. And one of the main projects that we did, though, was something that actually was what I wanted to do for my dissertation, but I couldn't. So what happened was, so like I said, I'm from Sweden, right? I was back home visiting my parents, and my parents had just gotten cable TV. And I was listening from another room, and I was listening to my dad flipping stations. And I'm thinking, this is kind of cool. I can actually figure out, I can't hear what they're saying, but I can figure out which station it is. I can figure out what language is being spoken, just from the prosody of it, right? So it's just like, get rid of the phonetic information. All I could just say, oh yeah, there's the Russian station. I was like, oh, this is very cool. So then I talked to the woman who ran the company. I said, well, this is a cool thing. And she's like, hey, I wonder if we could write a grant for this and, do this. And we ended up doing that for several years. And it was really cool work, because all we did was really looking at this data and tried to figure out what kinds of measures you could look at if you just got rid of all the phonetic information. knowing that we're not going to do as well as the people who were doing this, who were looking at the segmental stuff. But that's okay, because they weren't looking at the stuff we were looking at. So we're like, here, how can we measure things? So what this is just like grabbed out of a paper I found on paper. It's just kind of describing all the little ways. So I was like, well, what about, maybe it's the curvature of the onset of, the voiced part, maybe that in relation to the length, or how do you figure out if something is tone language, and how is that going to be different? What if it's a very simple syllable structure? How's that going to show up? And what this little tiny thing is over here is actually the different languages against each other. You can see that, not surprisingly, like English and German is really hard to pick apart this way, but like English and Spanish is much easier because of the syllable structure. Anything that's a tone language and non-tone language, obviously, right? But it was like more to it than just say, you can't just look at, sort of the continuation of the, just a pitch track or something like that. You have to kind of get in to look at, measure the little itty bitty stuff that happened across a long period of time. So that was all cool and all. And the other kinds of things I did were the first set of a Wizard of Oz study. Like has anybody done Wizard of Oz testing? Of course you have. So
you might want to explain.
Yes, I will. So it's, as you would expect, the man behind the curtain, right, from Wizard of Oz. So it's a really great technique for testing speech stuff. So you basically have some setup where the user doesn't know that they're talking to a machine that's actually not a functional machine, but it's some person behind the curtain controlling what's going to come back at them. So this is something that, so here we did something with error handling, error correction stuff. Like we had a task, it was a sort of very involved task with people had to sort something. I can't actually remember exactly what that was. It was like puzzle pieces. They had to sort something manually, where they were also supposed to give phone numbers back to somebody else and get something from via the over the phone, like thinking that they're supposed to read phone numbers to this computer, and the computer will read it back to them, and sometimes the computer would get it wrong. And how did they interact with that? So that was kind of my first experience with Wizard of Oz testing, which then was something that was a major thing in Nuance. I'll come back to that in a second. Very cool thing. And what's good about that for speech, right, is that even now when speech recognition is really good, like the recognition accuracy is really superb, right? But it's still going to make mistakes. So if you want to actually test something specifically, having the ability to control exactly what's coming back to the user, if you want to really try something, you can just override the recognition to say, okay, I'm going to feed something that's what I want them to hear right now. Get back to it. So then, there was this interlude of being in Pittsburgh. That wasn't really a full-time job, but it was important because I worked with, I did some research work with people at CMU, and there was all discourse structure, which is a very important thing when it comes to interactive assistance. So it was good sort of groundwork for that. So I'll just talk about that. So then Nuance. Okay, many, many years of Nuance. Let me talk about Wizard of Oz testing really again, because so here I was at, it was a professional services organization, so that means we all worked on customer projects, right? And that's really interesting in one respect because you get real user data, because this is actual, you're gonna have a project that's gonna go live, you're gonna get data from the users and you can analyze it and modify it and things like that. So, fantastic place for learning about how people actually interact with the system, the speech system. What we all did was spend all of our time practically worrying about how to best craft the prompts that the systems would say, depending on the context, right? Because a little tiny error in the prompt is going to, well, not error, but a little change, like a stress in the wrong place, and suddenly people don't get what you're asking about, and they're giving you some other information, and then everything falls apart. Or figuring out how to deal with people's different mental models and things like that, right? There was an example of a banking system that they said, well, this doesn't work right because people go in, they want to get into the bill pay thing, and then they stop, so it must be broken. Well, it turns out, and so we kind of went in and looked at the data of this, right, and what's going on here? They're doing this, but there's not like they keep trying, restarting or anything like that, so it must be something else going on. It turns out that people had figured out that this was the best place to, if you call up and say, bill payment, the first thing you'll say is, your bill is due on this date for this amount. Great, that's all I wanted to know. Done, hang up. Right? And so it wasn't really wrong, right? I mean, this was just the user figured out they figured out how to use the system for what they needed. But of course the business said, this is wrong, right? And we're like, uh-oh. The most frustrating part about working in that kind of environment is because it's speech, everybody thinks they know how to say things and what a prompt should be, right? And you're spending a lot of time trying to make a case for why the way that you say this prompt should be is the way it should be. And like, well, but or the people who say, well, sorry about this habit. One person said, well, I was yelling at the phone from across my office into the speakerphone and it wouldn't understand me, it doesn't work. Like, well, could you not do that, maybe? Could you try it some other way? Of course, is that how you normally do it? No. Well, so that's the frustrating part of this. The good part of it was the people that were there who all had the same kind of, feel, I want to understand how people use speech and language to talk to a computer, and then actually having the real data. And what this thing is, this is one slide wonders, it's like a whole bunch of questions. So one of the things that I ended up doing, kind of on my own, because I said, I'm curious about this stuff. How can I keep doing stuff without being in a place where I actually am able to talk about this in public too much, right? Just to some degree. So I said, well, there are all these questions that we want to know because the answers to them depend on how, will impact how we actually design an interaction, a speech interaction, right? So there are all these questions, do people barge in? I mean, do they jump in when the computer's talking? If you stress the right thing prosodically, are you going to actually get the response you're expecting? Is that not enough? All these kinds of things. And because we had all this data, we were able to actually, go and pull a bunch of transcribed user utterances and interactions, and look at it and kind of come up with a general response. And I say, well, in general, at first time somebody starts talking to the system at the main menu, 5% of the callers aren't going to say anything. For example, that's useful information to know, because then you get to a point where you're talking to a customer and says, well, 5% of the people aren't doing anything. It's like, yeah, that happens. Happens everywhere. I'm like, okay, right? So I mean, it was kind of like a way to actually find a way to get ammunition for ourselves to not have to argue the same point over and over again. But it was also really interesting, right? Because it says, how do people actually react to these various prompts and structures and things like that. So the one area at Nuance where I actually got a chance to do stuff that became actual publishable work was this driving simulator. Because we had a group of people that we worked with at IBM, and they were using nuance recognition, and they wanted to do a bunch of studies on texting and driving. So we had a setup in Sunnyvale that was a studio, usability lab, that we kind of, I don't know if you can see it okay, but there's a big screen, there's the moderator sitting over there. So we did this, we had a set of tasks where people come in from outside, recruited participants, and we'd give them a task of, the typical sort of driving around the track, making sure, you tell them you have to stay within these lines. So your rate of your driving has to be 40 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour, and they have to keep track of this. And then they have various tasks like, okay, now you want to send a text to your significant other that you're half an hour late or something like that. Okay, go ahead. And so they're doing this, and they have various ways of actually doing the texting. Right? First, we do it with people using their own phone. And of course, we say, oh, this is in the lab. We know you're not supposed to do this. We're not saying you're doing this. This part, I absolutely love. So the first thing, they're driving around, doing this. They're all sitting like this, right? It's like, oh yeah, and you don't do this, right? They're all hiding it from this, non-existing cop. One guy pulls it up like this and does really well because, of course, he can see everything going on. So I think that's such a great example of saying, in case you're wondering if in-lab studies are actually realistic, there's a really good example that they can really be very realistic. So then other ways that they would interact would be there were different kinds of displays where, they could see, kind of simulating a heads-up display where they could either then use speech to correct something that was not coming out the way they wanted it, or use buttons to navigate to different parts of the sentence and modify just that part of the sentence. And one thing that came up was that most people would just start over. If there was an error, people would say, go back 2 words, or click, 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 whatever. They just do it again. Anything that was involving just speech commands, which, no surprise, a lot less damaging to their performance as drivers as compared to things where they have to press buttons and stuff. So then I got tired of nuance after 13 years, and as did many of my friends and coworkers. Oh yeah, so I was going to talk about that. Yeah, I could do that. So actually this is interesting, right? Because from a cognitive science and linguistic and, processing point of view, these are the kinds of things that we worried about as voice UI designers, GUI designers. It's all about how do you manage to have this interaction between a computer and a person where, going back, what is this up here? Speech is linear and fleeting, right? As you know, you can't just sit and look at the screen. It's just come and gone because it's speech. So there's a cognitive load issue. But it's also limitless because the person can say whatever and they will, right? So the computer will have to, be able to handle it. And there are all these social, rules about turn taking and things like that. So, it all kind of came down to, we basically created a set of, best practices and things like that around this. And so, for example, obviously you have to be concise because a person just needs a little tiny bit of information and they have to respond, right? To be very concise and precise, and let people ask for more information when they need it and just in time and things like that. So the example here, we can say, you can place an order, here are specials, or get hours and directions. So here it's okay, you have to make sure that your voice talent, if you're using a voice talent, or your TTS, if you use text-to-speech, but we mostly use voice talents. You have to make sure that the delivery is correct, so that you're kind of, insinuating what is actually options there, right? But somebody who would be new to designing something like this might just say, to place an order, say place an order, right? To here are specials, say here are specials. That's not necessary, right? Because you want to write it in such a way that it's obvious what you can say, and then deliver it in a way that is obvious. Does that make sense? So, as you're looking at this, I'm sure you can sort of imagine to see where all the sort of cognitive principles come into play here, right? Be clear and build on expectations and conversation. There's this very easy to fall into way of speaking that we probably speak when we talk to another person, where you might say, do you want to cancel the 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. alarm? So it's like kind of, it's formed like a yes-no. It's actually a, which one is it? It's an A or B question, but it has a form of a yes-no question. And that's all over speech systems, and it's actually really confusing, right? Because you have to handle the fact that some people are going to see it as a yes-no question. And for some things, it's obvious, right? If you just have like sort of a closed choice of AM, PM, it's more, okay, you can probably get away with saying, do you want to cancel AM or PM? But, you know, do you want vanilla or chocolate? Or do you want sprinkles or whipped cream on your ice cream? I'm like, yeah. Right? I was like, oh, you mean I can only have one? I mean, right? So there are all those like little things that came into play. Right? How do you phrase this so it's as clear as possible, concise as possible, actually, you know, takes into account all the different likely mental models that people have around this and kind of move the conversation forward. Being consistent, there's a lot of tricks around, you know, sort of bulleting with voice. It's like you have 3 choices, you know, it's the first one, second one, third one, to make sure that people know how long they have to listen, and you know, the sort of difference between, you know, end focus and primary focus, all these kinds of things that are total, you know, cognitive principles. Anyway, so then a bunch of us went to Amazon, and then we couldn't talk about what we were doing because Amazon's very secretive. But now we can talk about it, sort of, because now it's out and open, right? So we're working on the Echo and the Fire phone, which I'm very sad that the Fire phone didn't go anywhere for various political and battery life reasons, because I had some really cool features in it. And hopefully some of that will pop up again. But it did do a lot more kind of give and take, you know, more conversation. And if you talk, how many people use, you know, Alexa of some sort, Amazon Echo or Dot or Google Home, Siri? Talk to your Android phone? I'm surprised there's not more people. It's very good information. So, you know, with okay, how many people have at all ever tried to talk to an Echo device or, you know, Amazon Alexa, Google Home, even if you don't have one? Okay. So the thing is about those is a lot of that stuff is very, it's one shot, right? So you can, it looks very impressive. You can say, show me, or not show me, but play me this long title song by this artist, you know, from this year or whatever, and it can do that really well. But of course you can't get into this conversation back and forth as easily. There's some very limited stuff. Setting an alarm, you can do that. Okay, fine. Set an alarm, what time? 3 a.m. or p.m. That's about as long as it gets, right? But beyond that, that's kind of the thing that everybody's kind of working on right now is, you know, and between that and like biometrics of being able to know who's talking to you, those are going to be an important next step. So I was there for a little bit, but you know, not for very long. So then, then I got lured away to a startup called 22 Otters. And I was lured away for various reasons. It was again a small startup, and I realized I really like small places where I can do a wider set of things. And it was a healthcare related thing. It was an app that was focused on helping people prepare for surgery procedures or help deal with chronic illness and things like that. And it was multimodal, and it had speech and natural language stuff, and I was like, this is really cool, I'm gonna do it. So it was an interactive assistant, right? Or virtual assistant, what? And mostly ran on the phone. I mean, a smartphone. And there were a couple interesting things about this, and this is what the main thing here of the in-depth stuff we're going to be. Let me just move on here to the next thing. So the issue is that you might have something. So the first thing we looked at was colonoscopy prep, right? And most of you are lucky enough you never had to have one yet. But it'll happen. So it's not fun, right? It's like, at least that's all you need to know. It's just no fun. Because the thing is, there's all these rules about, okay, 5 days before you have to stop taking whatever, aspirin or whatever. And then 3 days before you stop eating this thing and the other. And then 2 days before you do this. It's like all these rules, right? And they hand you this instruction sheet that you probably don't even look at until it's too late. Or this, like, the important stuff is like the bottom of page 6, right? You're going, oh, you mean I wasn't supposed to eat nuts? Okay, nuts, you know? Okay, I'm screwed. So there are all these things. Plus then there's the thing that people show up, they don't want to do the colonoscopy, but they said, they didn't actually say they're not going to show up because they just wanted, like, oh, oops, I did it wrong. No, you did it on purpose because you didn't want to do it, right? So there's like these lost time and money for the people who are, you know, for the actual providers, the health providers. So, you know, how do we deal with this? How can we get people involved? How do we get people who actually want to do the right thing, make them do the right thing so they don't forget, and, you know, make it all work for everybody? So we had this thing where there was like a care calendar, there were instructions that would pop up and say, okay, it's time to start taking your, you know, 12th dose of laxative, aren't you happy? No, I'm not. And it had this QA, question answer system in it, so you could ask things like, all right, can I eat peanuts, right? And it'll be like, well, yes, because it'll look like it knows what time and day your procedure is. You say, okay, it's 3 days before, and I say, oh, yeah, you can still eat peanuts. But then if it's the next day, I said, no, you can't have any peanuts until after your procedure. So it's this big grid system of interaction. Like, we have to know who they are, you know, what's the procedure, when is the procedure, what kind of special instructions does the doctor have? Because of course all the doctors have like different rules, right? Because it would be too handy if they were all the same. So some will say, oh, you can eat anything until 2 days before, or no, you can't eat anything red after, you know, this day, and it's like all this stuff, right? So we had all these various things to incorporate, and then of course we also had things like, can I take, you know, can I still take, you know, insert long name of drug here, right? So we had to be able to understand what they said when they asked for a second. So here's just a sample.
What question do you have for me?
Does insurance cover this?
Be sure to bring your insurance card to the procedure. Out-of-pocket costs are policy specific. Call your insurance company about any out-of-pocket expenses that may apply to you.
So it's just one example of what it might look like. You can see that just the screens and stuff are all different because we did all a bunch of testing also on, you know, do you like this style? And because a lot of the users are older, because it's a colonoscopy thing, so automatically the average age is going to be over 50. Not everybody's going to be over 50, but you know. And it's kind of stressful, and like this was just the first kind of proof of concept, and we expected we're going to do more things. So we're like, well, if people are sick, they're going to be all stressed out, and they're not going to think straight. So we had to be really helpful. And there might be medication where they can't see straight, and they might have, you know, medication or whatever that, you know, they can't use the keyboard or whatever. So we tried to be very accessibility aware, right? And you know, you could be as sharp as anything, but you know, your vision may have started going too. So you want to make sure that you don't fall for the curse of the skinny gray font. So here's there's like another example. So this is my very hammy dad, right? Who is like a proud Luddite. He doesn't like computers or anything, but he was kind of getting into this. Trying to get them with you, like, no, come back.
Who's there a second ago?
I know.
Was there
Teasing me. Try this. Never know when it's not working. man.
Oh, there it is.
There's something.
What question do you have for me?
Could I have a glass of beer?
Until 10 p.m. the day before your exam, you can still have all liquids, including alcohol, though you should limit your intake since alcohol can cause dehydration. Starting 4 hours before your exam, you should not drink anything, including water.
Thank you.
So actually, that's a kind of interesting thing. So notice how at the very end he says thank you. This is something that we saw at Nuance too, that especially the older the population, right? It's a cultural and you know, generational, whatever, thing of actually talking back to, or saying thank you and goodbye and everything like that. And we would have these systems where say, okay, if you're done, you can hang up any time, you know, we're done here, hang up. And people are like, not hanging up, we'll say until you say goodbye. And then I'm gonna say goodbye. So you get into this loop and, you know, so you have to know about those things and take care of those too, right? Now, can I play the other one? Come on.
Do you have for me?
Could I have a piece of cheese today?
You can still have some solid food, including dairy.
Another one I couldn't find where he said, can I have a scotch? Like,
Was that cheese?
that was cheese on the sandwich.
Oh.
Yeah, it was cheese, and you figure you can have cheese, you can have anything. It's Swedish, who cares about cheese? So a couple of things about this is that, so this is very different from, you know, Alexa, Google Home, kind of stuff, those kinds of things, because they're very broad, right, for good and bad. They can't handle everything, but people don't know that, you know, or, you know, how can they know? So, so it's more of a general population. The Alexa kind of thing is more general and broad content. You know, that also doesn't change, right? Whereas this, as we saw, it's very specific to the particular domain, specific, you know, a specific doctor, specific provider even. And the responses will differ by quite a bit depending on when you ask the question. So you make sure that people know that and they don't think, well, you said 3 days ago I could eat peanuts, so, you know. So it was very important to be able to get across, well, first of all, this is like, yeah, people kind of getting instructions to start with, but also saying this is to help you. It doesn't take the place of the written instructions, but it's to help you, like when you're standing in the store and say, well, can I eat this? Okay, great, I'll eat this. Or, but you have to make sure when you're wording the response, you have to make sure that you get across that whatever I say now isn't going to be true 2 days from now, because that would be kind of a disaster. And of course, since it was medical, we have to get a lot of approval. And here, of course, getting it wrong is a whole different thing from playing the wrong song or something, right? You want to be really sure that you're getting the right response to the person. So this is why we kind of always had, it was a multimodal thing. So we'd have the response in audio, you'd have stuff on the screen and showing what we thought, what we recognized the person as having said. This is what I was thinking. Yeah, and the design principles kind of touched on this already, right? It's like we tried to stick with everything, but the main thing was make sure that this is something that's going to work for people who might have various, you know, challenges or whatever you want to call it, with vision, with, you know, with tapping on things because they might have shaky hands, whatever. So the visual testing we did and stuff, that was very important, right? Not just the audio aspect, but to make sure that this was something that people could read easily and were comfortable with and still looked okay. And we did tests on, you know, color blindness and things like that. So we also did more things then with the same approach, saying, well, so here's something where, so we had a chief medical officer at George Washington. I said, this would be a really cool thing if we could go and use this technique. And when somebody comes in for, you know, intake, we always start by asking, well, what medications are you taking? and people don't really remember or whatever. So I said, it would be great if you could do this at home. So before you even come in, have your device, you walk around, and it's sort of, so we created this thing where it sort of steps you through, you know, okay, now go to where you usually keep your medication, you know, look in your medicine cabinet, you know, tell me the names, okay, and it would make a list, build a list for you. And then that would be available. So this is actually, first you think, oh, well, that's gonna be really hard, right? But it's actually easier than a lot of other tasks for speech, because in the background for this, we have the whole, you know, the medication, the list of names of drug names, like the NDC 70,000 name thing. It just goes in, it's like it doesn't match on something, well, then there are ways you make sure it either matches or gets rejected. So it's actually easier than a lot of other tasks in speech, but demos are little. It's useful. And tips.
When you're ready, tap the mic button and say the names of all the meds you take regularly that you remember the names of.
Yeah, I take Lipitor, Plavix, Wellbutrin, and vitamin C.
To remove a name, tap the X next to that name. To add more meds, tap the mic to say the name.
So this one just shows you get a different answer different times. But it brought up a lot of questions, right? So how do we do this, you know, and how, you know, how do you engage users? What are people's preferences in terms of input and output? And we had all these questions around this one. How can we ask this? We're a little tiny poor startup. So, well, okay. So then you do it in various ways, right? Of course, we did have some data that we could analyze, which is great. I mean, eventually we got real user data to look at. But the things that I made really great use of for social media, like Facebook, used to be, before everybody posted politics all the time, used to be a really great way of getting feedback on like A/B kinds of, you know, quick user testing stuff, just like the first really quick thing, or test questions before you send it out to something that might cost money. So I did that a lot. I would say, hey, you know, what's your preference, this or this, or how would you, what does this mean to you, whatever. And usually I have all these friends who would just respond, and they're kind of like, okay, well no, this is very useful. And they're like, oh yeah, I should have worded this differently, because there was some confusion in my question. So it's a really quick, easy way to get some initial, really quick feedback on some user experience kind of thing, but also being able to double check how I phrase it so I didn't get something I wasn't intending. I built this whole sort of target user group, sort of specialist set of people. Like people, I would ask, you know, who do I know who may have had the colonoscopy, or, you know, who will have one, and sort of, and I ended up having a group of like 25 or so people who I could really get into asking questions in depth, right? And saying, you know, well, how was your experience? You know, what happened when you're doing this? What was hard? What was easy? Blah, blah, blah. And then once we had a prototype of this, I said, can you play with this? And, you know, and then do some actual sort of one-on-one user testing with them. And that way I could also do follow-up. I talked a lot about Mechanical Turk. I love Mechanical Turk. It's a fantastic way of getting quick data, as long as you know how to ask the question and ask an appropriate question for, you know, what you're expecting. The problem for us was that, you know, it was hard to get a lot of older people on Mechanical Turk, so I had to get a lot of data for, you know, to cover it. But it's great for being people that you don't know, so it's better in that respect than the social media thing, but of course you can't follow up with follow-up questions. I'm a master at asking strangers feedback. I'll like go up on a cafe and shove the phone in their face, which you like, A or B, you know? And usually people think that's really cool because, you know, if you do it in the right way, and I kind of, I'm being flippant about it, but you know, people are like in line or, you know, sitting around having nothing to do at an airport or something. People love talking about stuff like that in general. So I do a lot of just like really quick, okay, I'm just testing something here. That's what that is. Like, iPhone's great for that. You're just like, hey, it looks like a real thing, right? And okay, yeah, I called up Cash and said, I think I need to call Mousekeeping. I'm like, what? Okay. So I did. Because, I need to know what the users have to deal with. So the real data, this is just showing that sort of pre-launch and post-launch, we actually managed to incorporate the various findings and get fewer cancellations. This is based on data where we actually were in contact with a clinic that used the app, and we had, actual data that we could match up with which user did what in the app. And, we got all these nice little results of, the better scheduling, and people were actually prepared. So the preventable reason, unknown reason, preventable would be things like, the thing is, earlier, people didn't know if something didn't actually, why was this like a bad result, right? Because people were a little vague about what they're doing. Now we have more like, okay, you didn't actually do this because you didn't respond to this thing in the app and things like that. Anyway. Oh yeah, we had also, at the very end of the app, there was a feedback portion done in another voice, not the female voice, but another voice, where like typical, was this, how easy was this to use, things like that. And people were extremely positive about it, which was really great. And I really like the one that says, it reminded me of something I would have forgotten otherwise, because that was really kind of what we're hoping for, is that this wasn't going to take the place of something else, but it was just an additional thing. So here's more in depth on a couple of Mechanical Turk studies. So we had this one. We were curious about what the app should look like in terms of, should it have a moving avatar, like a little sort of animated avatar that's talking, and is that going to be more exciting than a photo or some sort of animation? That last one actually, the car actually kind of drives by, which is kind of cute. So we have some five use cases here. We had the photo one that was just, a photo of this, nurse person. The avatar was the animated moving avatar, and all this test was all in one little chunk of dialogue. Same for all cases. We had the static. Oddcast is the company that made this. It was just a static picture of the middle one. The text was just text with nothing else, and the illustration was the moving car or whatever. And so we did this, different versions of this. In this particular one, Mechanical Turk, we had, people between 18 and 69, as high as 69. Gender was pretty much balanced. And let's see here. So some of the things, it's going to be pretty puny, I'm sure. Let's see here. So this says all, this is everybody together, and then I split male, female, and above 40 and younger than 40, just to see what kind of differences there might be. And for this particular test, and some of these, we did other tests that, show the same thing later. But the, shouldn't stand up. The couple of things that pop out, like the female population was more fond of the illustration. This one doesn't show that much interest. But what's more interesting, I think, is the reasons people give. Because of course in Mechanical Turk you can ask people for actual feedback and saying, well, why did you say that? People can actually, as can type stuff in. So with the avatar, the moving drawing, people who liked it thought it was great because they felt they were being more drawn in, they really liked it. They felt like this was like a real entity here. Photos, thought, yeah, that looks professional, that's nice, it doesn't bother me, kind of thing. Illustrations, they loved illustrations because they were really cute and fun and engaging. And some people really like the text thing because they're like, I don't need those darn pictures, I just want just the facts, man. Then the least like, again, it's like it's so small I can't read it. The interesting part here is, I think, the younger versus older, because the purple is the avatar. Right? So the last column here, so it's, the last two is older, younger. So the avatar was disliked more by the younger population. The older users tended to like the moving avatar more. Like it was engaging to them. So it's like really creepy. Now, of course, the problem with this is like this is just a one-time thing. People see this. What we don't have information here is longitudinal studies, right? And that could be a totally different thing. This was a different set of data. This is not Mechanical Turk. This is actually from the real collected user data, the real data. And we knew what the age of the users were and which questions they asked. So the 164 questions, that's as much data as we had at the time when we pulled this, was these 55 patients that had provided data for this had asked a total of 164 questions between them of things like, what can I eat today? Things like that. And the first thing we looked at, because we could tell like who was the input done by typing or by speaking. So the 4 columns here is below 40, 40 to 49, 50, 59, 60 plus. So as you can see, the biggest difference here is the people who only typed were the younger population. And the people who used speech more, or speech only, were the older set, not surprisingly. This was, again, back to the previous set on just asking how people felt about, and specifically, how do you like the avatar? And again, the younger users, the younger half, disliked it more. The older users liked it more, sure. So, this one, oh yeah, one thing we were wondering about is it important for somebody to be able to choose what the avatar looks like? And if so, what should it look like? Should it look like similar to themselves, similar to their doctor? What kinds of things might be different? Should it be male, female, certain ethnicity match or mismatch, that kind of thing. But based on the questions we did ask, we didn't dig into this much more, but there wasn't any real obvious thing. People would just say, if you're gonna have this thing, just make sure it doesn't look creepy. It's really what this means, right? There wasn't anything really strong saying, I have to be able to choose. There was some variation, but it wasn't really a big thing. Let's come back, I'm not sure why this one. This is back to the other thing too of tapping and typing versus speaking. That again, the older users were much more prone to, were fond of speaking. Both they did it more and they liked doing it more, and the younger users would type more. This is something that I would like to dig into more than I have, but since we had exactly the data of how people interacted when they typed or spoke, we looked specifically at exactly the construction of how they asked the questions. So these are kind of chunked in types of, style of phrasing. So the question is just a pure question, can I drink milk? Can I do this? What do I do? The other one, the context of the question would be people will sort of line up, set up the question. It's like, okay, this thing is happening, is that normal? Or, I did this thing, is that okay? And the statements is just, here's the thing, deal with it, right? So, my appointment changed. Okay. A person probably know what to do with that. I don't think we knew what to do with it. We should have. We did after this. The word or phrase would just be very, like, nausea, right? You don't need anything more, you just need to know this, and probably means I'm nauseous, not what. Or, will I be nauseous? I don't know. What does it mean? And the command is just, I want, change the appointment date. Right. So the question, what's interesting to me about this is that lining this up with how the input was done, was it typed in or spoken? There are there are differences in which structure was used where, and it wasn't necessarily what I expected to see. Like the command, I would expect the command to be something you'd see in spoken input but not in text input, but in fact we didn't. The command of just do this, change the appointment date, in this data set, there were no examples of that in the spoken set, but the people who typed it in, they actually would, some of them would actually do this, of actually saying, giving a command, which, that of course surprised me. And also, speech had a lot more just direct questions, like, what can I eat today? That kind of makes sense, right? Because you just pick it up, what question do you have? What can I do? What can I eat? Can I eat this? That makes sense. But like I said, this is something that I would love to actually dig into a little bit more. And this is divvying it up by age, to see which style of input was more common across which age group. I'm not sure that there's enough here to actually read much into, other than that there's, questions are the most important. For whatever reason, the 40 to 49 people don't like to ask questions. I don't know what that's about. It needs more data. Then I had a similar second one where we did between subjects, where three different groups of 50 participants each got different versions of this. And they just saw the one. We just wanted to see if it was a similar kind of result. And we had some different questions there. And some of the things that we asked here was things like, which statement best matches how you feel about the voice you heard? And there are things like, I like the voice, but I don't want to hear the voice. I just want to see it on the screen and things like that. The main point here is that all of them said, I like to see, I like to hear the stuff. I like the voice, fine, voice is great, and I want the audio feedback because it's great. Because we're kind of wondering, maybe they don't want to hear it at all. They do. We also wanted to see if people felt like they could trust the information from the app, and that was also, across all of them, pretty much, yeah, mostly trusted. Reasonable answer. And the third set we did with Mechanical Turk for this was, we had the same interaction, same computer interaction, but one was with the recorded voice that you heard it before, and one was done with nuanced text-to-speech. With one of the newer voices, so it sounded, doesn't sound all weird, mechanical. It sounded good, but it sounded like TTS. And here, one group heard the recorded one, and the other group heard the TTS version. And we had people rate various utterances on, does it sound sympathetic? Does she sound disappointed? Does she sound stern? Because there were all these kinds of questions. Some of them were, great, you're done, or someone was, well, you really need to do this, before tomorrow, kind of thing. Of course, the thing is that the human that was reading the prompt actually has this real emphatic, or like empathetic way of doing things that are appropriate, and the TTS would sound the same in style, no matter what, if it says, awesome work or you suck, right? Instead of the TTS is kind of the same. So what's interesting about that, of course, is that people, even though the TTS is very kind of flat and not very emotional, people just read into it based on the wording of the prompt, if the character is happy with them or not. Here, the trust of the information was the same for TTS and recorded, so that's good. And not surprisingly, people predicted that they'd get really sick of the TTS much faster than the recorded voice. And I think they'd probably be correct in that. And then, of course, the other kinds of stuff we did was, recording all these comments and stuff, and that's where you really get the really cool stuff, right? You just get, you get the statistics and stuff, but then you get people to sort of say what they like and what they think should be in there, and, I like it, so I don't have to, read the small print, and, voice is great, but of course we had the thing of the avatar's creepy, or no, the avatar's weird, everything in between. And some people wanted humor and games and stuff like that, and of course that's really hard, right? Because that'd be great if you can kind of figure out what kind of humor they want, because that could really go wrong real fast. So, all right. So then my company got bought by Nuance, like it happens, like everybody does. So then I moved on to where I am now, which is Denon Moran's Polk, which is Sound United. Then we're doing, things that's related to doing in-home speech, Internet of Things kinds of stuff. I stuck this in too because what I've been doing more recently too is giving classes and talks and stuff on this stuff, because it's such the interest in industry right now, with people getting into how can we learn more about doing this, UX, UI for voice and speech and language and things like that. So it's like totally the hot field. I had a couple of, just in case you thought that this was like a solved problem and speech is all done and stuff, there's like just a bunch of things where I was messing around with Alexa and Google Home at home because I was trying some things out, and then funny things happened and I recorded them and was very happy because I know this is very hard, and it's like not slamming Google or Amazon because I know how hard it is, but I'm really happy every time they make a mistake like this because it makes for really good demos. It can go wrong. So this one is like our favorite thing to play these days. So there's this French-Canadian band that I was trying to pronounce when I had a cold, and I was trying to get it to play music, but I got a very strange response. Come on, don't do that. Come on.
Play music by La Vallée de Castel.
All right, here's a Spotify playlist called Augustus Spouting Whale Upside Down Face Sun Face Poop.
I was so glad I recorded that because there's no way I could get that to happen again. So basically, there's a playlist called Augustus Upside Down Whale Spouting Whale Face Poop something. I was like, what? What are you reading? What are these emoticons? Where do they come from? So, yeah. So there's the question. The current. Oh, actually, I'll come back to that. There's another problem with Alexa.
Living room on.
Okay.
Living room off.
Okay.
Living room on.
Okay.
Living room 20%.
Okay.
Living room 50%.
Okay.
Living room off.
Okay.
So, it doesn't take a lot to be a little more interesting than saying exactly the same thing in exactly the same way, right? But there's the balance. You don't want to push it too far, right? Because you also don't, there's the whole persona of your thing, right? Are you going to be annoying? Well, in my opinion, Siri is pretty damn annoying pretty fast because it will be just too many commentaries on things you shouldn't be commenting. That's my personal opinion. But, a person is not going to say something like this exactly the same way every time, right? So that's something where, a user could tell you that's kind of really lame. All right, so now, one of my favorite things to ask is, play Let It Be, or similar things.
Play Let It Be.
Play Let It Be Love.
All right, this is a great song, Let It Be Love. Craig Armstrong, blah, blah, that's great, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to Let It Be. You should not take that, if you're Amazon, and make it into another song. There's no reason for that, right? You know the song, you have it available, And the thing that when you're designing for these things, you want to be really careful that you don't sound too sure of yourself, right? And say, okay, here it is. But no, actually no, So there's this whole concept of how do you give somebody something where you're not really sure that it's the right thing, but you still want to give it to them because you don't want to say, do you want this one? Because then just play it, right? It's like you want to give them something if it's not an important thing, like, did you want to transfer $500? Well, yeah, okay, fine, you want to confirm that, but playing a song, you just say what it is and play it, but don't be so certain that you're playing the right thing if you're not playing the right thing. There are ways around this.
Play a Swedish radio station.
You want to hear a station for Swedish music, right?
Sure.
I couldn't find a station for Swedish music.
Well, then why are you asking me, right? So it's like sometimes confirmation is good, but no, not that. All right, here's my personal pet peeve, right? So we live in Brisbane, California. It's not Brisbane, it's Australia, right? We live in Brisbane. So nobody gets that right.
What's the weather in Brisbane today?
In Brisbane today, it'll be rainy with a forecasted high of 84 and a low of 73.
Which
Currently
Brisbane?
it's 75 with rain.
What's the weather in Brisbane, California?
In Brisbane, it's 62 and partly cloudy. It'll be mostly cloudy there today with a forecasted high of 66 and a low of 55.
So it's like, well, you should kind of know, and there's no reason why it's doing it this way. But yeah, you want to make sure that if you have a stationary device or not, right, it should know where you are and make use of it. And kind of, that was not 84 degrees.
Hey Google, how much is 14 by 15?
The answer is 29.
14 by 15 is 29. So here, the problem here, of course, is like, yeah, I was on purpose, I was kind of not being very clear what I said, but I did say 14 by 15, right? And the problem here is that Google should have said, you know, it should have said more clearly what it thought I was asking for, which Alexa did in the previous, another example. So it's one thing to be concise and short, but you want to not be so short that it's confusing, right? So make sure that if I'm asking for a calculation, you probably want to make sure, you know, indirectly, you don't have to ask, did you ask 14 times 4 or 14 plus 15? No, you just say 14 times or 14 plus is this.
Play Enter Sandman by Metallica.
Playing Enter Sandman.
Awesome version.
Alexa, play Enter Sandman.
Playing Enter Sandman.
Another great version.
Alexa, stop.
So for various reasons, there's this problem that happens, and this is kind of where, this is like kind of one of my favorite examples, because it shows where, you know, the recognition is great, but that's not enough, right? There's this whole problem where I keep talking about, I think I actually have this somewhere. Hang on, give me this guy. The three-legged stool of Bowie design, where, you know, you have recognition that's really awesome now. And then you have the interpretation part. It's like, okay, I heard play Enter Sandman. I have to like match that up to this, you know, play some music. That's a piece of music, okay, and then I have to go find it, right? And then I give back the response. And this is where stuff is failing, right? Because these things don't cleverly work together at all times, and a lot of times they don't. And as a user, all I see is, you didn't give me what I asked for. I thought, okay, sure, I may have not said Enter Sandman by Metallica, but sometimes some of them I did, and you still gave me those things. Like, yeah, they made it, but that's kind of not really what the default interpretation of the request is, right? So this is kind of where things are really falling apart today. If you're playing with these devices a lot, it's not so much, I mean, the recognition can go wrong, but more commonly it's after that. You know, it's the interpretation, it's the figuring out what the user actually meant, and this is where it's really going to be, you know, this is where the cognitive science approach, I think this is where you have a lot of things to offer and where the actually interesting questions lie, which is, I guess I should jump back. Yeah, this is just kind of like, how do you, if you're kind of in a research mind, how do you survive in industry, or how do you thrive? Well, first of all, you know, stay curious and you find ways to do research. I'm not saying in one way or another that you should go into industry or stay in academia. That's kind of, everybody has to figure it out. But the way to figure it out is to know yourself, right? And different companies can be very different in what they let you do and what they let you talk about. and how free your hands are to do research and share it or not, right? And I mean, a place like Amazon, yeah, you could do research within a certain area if you're in the research part of the company, but you probably can't even talk to people you know who are in other groups about it. Kind of just, I'm sure you can just think of many things in your specific field of, or specific area of CogSci that is relevant to this, and where you could actually, if you wanted to, dig into some of these problems that come up and make it be a better solution for the user. And I want to just kind of like not delve on this, just dig into China. So, you will have data access if you're in industry probably, but you may not be able to share it. Depends on the place, right? And my real question is how can we as CogSci people go out there and sort of help the world have better applications in speech and language? Because now's the time. I mean, this is totally the hot field to be in many ways, but because it's such a hot field, then people are kind of coming up with things that are more or less functional. Yeah, the curse of the MVP, like the minimum viable product, is something you hear a lot in industry. A question of it, what makes it viable? Quick to market, but may not be good for the user. But maybe if you use that to your advantage, I should stop talking because it's like we're out there. So, I would love nothing more than to have people in one way or another, in academia, in industry, whatever, actually find a way to incorporate what they know about people and humans and cognition and find ways to make this stuff work better. There. That's slightly rewritten from, it was another quote from somebody. It's like, it's gone to a point where it's really interesting, but it kind of needs CogSci. It needs a theory of mind. It needs to actually not act like a autistic cartoon, but like a person, a human, an intelligent being, something like that. So, all right. Questions, comments?